Okay, we have another piece of ordnance from history here. I'm going to attribute it to the Viet Cong, but I have seen it mentioned in literature that it may date back to World War II, but I cannot find good historical information to verify that. So what we have here is the Viet Cong toe popper, or as is known in U.S. military literature from back in the 1960s as the cartridge trap. This is a very simple type of booby trap or mine that can be created to use what you have available. Its whole purpose is to wound an enemy soldier, not necessarily to kill them. It'll only kill them if, when the trap goes off, it just happens to be, some type of vital organ or something is in direct line of that bullet as it's coming through the air. Remember, if you're a guerrilla, it is better to wound an enemy soldier than kill them. You kill an enemy soldier, you're just taking one off the battlefield. You wound one of your opponents, you are taking 2 to 5 off the battlefield. One obviously being the wounded soldier, and then 1 to 4 others to evacuate that soldier off of the battlefield, get them to the helicopter or the ambulance. Now, this, as I said, this is a way to use ammunition you can't chamber. Give you an example on this, or a little situation to think of. We are a guerrilla force, say that we're Viet Cong. We're equipped with AK-47s and AKM assault rifles, chambered in 7.62 by 39. We are facing an opponent who is also equipped with AK rifles, but they're equipped with AK-74s or AK-103s chambered in 5.45 by 39. We cannot take their ammunition and load it in our rifles. We've captured a case of ammunition from them from the back of a Jeep. So now we have, 500 or 1,000 rounds of 5.45 that we can't use inside our weapons. But how can we still use it against our enemy? One of the ways: turn them into booby traps, turn them into mines. I'm letting the camera guy adjust onto each picture here so we can get some better detail when we point this stuff out. Now, the first two I'm going to show you are actually ones that I seen in a video done by the U.S. Marine Corps in the late 1960s called Viet Cong Mines and Booby Traps. It is on YouTube. I will try to put a link in the description so that you can go through and watch the video if you haven't seen it before, or if you have seen it before, to re-watch it again. Now, this one is really simple, really basic. We have a board. We have a nail driven through the center, and I got a feeling the end of the nail would be rounded a little bit after it's come through the board in order to turn it into the profile of basically a firing pin. And then you have 2 pegs or nails along either side of that that are just a little bit wider than the cartridge that's going to be our primary charge inside this mine. Once the cartridge is in place, we have wire or twine that is wrapped around here to keep the cartridge from falling out between these 2 or 3 pegs or nails. Now, this is put in the ground inside a hole just a little bit bigger than the trap itself. The top of the trap is above the surface of the ground, above the dirt. So you probably have just the bullet, maybe a little bit of the cartridge casing that's coming out above ground. It is camouflaged with grass from in the area. Not so much that it's going to cushion it, whoever steps on top of it, just enough to hide it. The unsuspecting GI would come along, his foot would come down, hit the top of the bullet, pushing the whole casing, the whole cartridge, down onto our homemade firing pin here, the nail, setting off the primer, setting off the powder, propelling the bullet forward in only one direction, and that's right through the boot that's stepping directly over top of it. Now, this next version is a version that I think is meant more for use for carbine ammunition or pistol ammunition, because when you look at the video, it looks like it's probably 30 caliber carbine ammo. The previous trap was more for rifle casings or rifle ammunition. We have two boards. Our bottom board is going to be where our firing pins and such are on. The top board is our pressure plate. Now in this board would be 2 to 3 nails. These nails, once again, will be centered right below the corresponding holes on the top board where the cartridges would be fed through. The nails, once again, rounded a little bit so that it doesn't just punch a hole into the primer, it actually acts like a firing pin. On the ends of the boards were 2 pegs. These pegs were just guides. Right above the pegs on our pressure plate were just channels that were drilled through, that the pegs would come through. They would be a little bit loose because it's just meant as a guide. When the GI comes along, steps on the pressure plate, pushing it down. The pressure plate gets guided by the 2 pegs, so it comes straight down, right on top of the nails, setting off the cartridges that are inside this top board. Pretty straightforward and a pretty ingenious way to use the enemy's pistol ammunition against them. Because most ammunition is rimless, probably have to figure out a way to keep the cartridges from just getting pushed through the board. So I don't know if they might have put something around in the rim, like a piece of wire or something to hold it in place, or what they ended up doing. Now we'll come down to the next one here. Now the next 2 are ones that I've actually seen in survivalist literature. So I got a feeling veterans of Vietnam, they came back, joined the survivalist movement late in the Cold War, and they remembered this stuff from back then, and they did improvements on it, and it appeared in literature. But in this one, going back to the Vietnam era, our casing is either a section of bamboo or it's a cut down 50 cal casing. We have our rifle cartridge, which is our primary charge in this one. Our piece of bamboo or our 50 cal casing, we've shortened it so that you still get a good chunk of the rifle casing is sticking up and out. We have a nail or a screw down in the bottom. That is going to be our firing pin. Now I'll mention this on bamboo for those of you that don't know much on it. You may think that bamboo is just this big long hollow tube. It's not. It's actually a series of chambers. When you look at a piece of bamboo, you see those little horizontal lines every so often as you look up the bamboo. Between each one of those little lines is an air chamber. That line is actually a solid piece of wood going across where it grew together. Because of that design, that's why indigenous peoples where bamboo grows, they would cut the bamboo, cut it right over the top of one chamber, right over the bottom, and then they would drill a hole in the top through the top of the chamber. They could fill it with water and put a cork in it, and they had their own little homemade canteen. Well, in this case, they took a piece of bamboo that was smaller. Basically, just the interior was large enough for the cartridge casing, along the lines of a chamber or barrel, cut down to the length that they needed, and then they would put a nail through the center up into the chamber. Then you just drop the cartridge down in the top, put it in the ground. Like I said before, just the top of it is sticking above the ground, hidden in grass. GI steps on it, pushes it down, setting it off. Now, if they were using a 50 cal casing, they might cut it down again to get the right length. Maybe they'd kind of close it in a little bit so the casing would still get a good guide going down. if it was considerably smaller. Down where the primer was, they would punch that out, drill it out, and they would put through a screw. And they would make sure that screw would not press out the bottom, so they would make sure they would screw it up in there and it's good and snug. Now the next one here is one that I've seen in survivalist literature. I can't say this is directly from Vietnam for certain, but on this one we're using shotgun shells. We have basically a little cup down here at the bottom, so a little bit bigger pieces of pipe or something with some type of cap at the bottom. Down at the bottom you have a hole drilled in the center, screw that comes through, the end of it rounded to act as the firing pin, and then the screw is held into this cup with a nut. We have another piece of pipe that fits into this bottom cup here that is meant to slide up and down. That piece of sliding pipe is just large enough for the shotgun shell to fit inside, and the rim of the shotgun shell is basically at the bottom of the pipe. So the pipe is holding it in place. You got the rim right here below the bottom of the pipe. It's not going to get pushed forward. Same thing. This will be sitting down directly over the top of the screw. You have, maybe you'll put like a piece of cardboard or something right over the top, or you'll keep it as is. You just have grass or something over the top. The person comes along, steps on the top of the sliding pipe here, which will act as a pressure plate. There's enough play to push it down. The primer gets activated by our screw turned firing pin. Shotgun shell goes off and it shreds the foot. All these are pretty straightforward. It's ways of using captured ammunition that you're not able to use and still cause the enemy casualties. There are slight variations on this out there, I'm sure, that I did not come across, but these are the 4 basic versions that I was able to find that I wanted to point out. Go through, watch that video on Viet Cong mines and booby traps from the 60s. Pay attention on how the things are set up, how it was made to work, because that knowledge may come in handy here someday. As always, the obligatory warning: don't try this at home unless there's been an invasion. We got aliens are landing in Washington, D.C. and are using death rays to disintegrate people, or we got Chinese paratroopers falling from the sky. If you do, you'll get caught, go to jail. You get the idea. Now, for all my engineer brothers and the Patriot militia movements, always remember, essayons.